There is a runway in the middle of the South China Sea, not near a coast, not near an island. In open water, where the ocean floor drops 180 feet below the surface, and where typhoons are born, fighter jets land on it. Radar domes scan the horizon from it. Missile batteries sit loaded on it. 12 years ago, this was open sea. China didn't discover this place. It didn't inherit it. It manufactured it, dredging 100 million cubic meters of sand from the ocean floor and piling it into land where no land had any right to exist. 7 islands, 3 military-grade runways, a bill that cost $10 billion, and a construction timeline so compressed that by the time the world understood what was happening, it was already done. The question was never just how China built this. It's how China built a fortress in plain sight, and what that fortress was always designed to do. Every year, roughly $3.5 trillion worth of trade moves through the South China Sea oil heading to Japan. Electronics bound for Europe, grain moving toward the ports of Southeast Asia. This single body of water connects the manufacturing heart of the world to almost every major market on Earth. Whoever controls it doesn't just hold water. They hold leverage. China understood this before anyone wanted to admit it. For decades, Beijing had been drawing a line on the map, a sweeping curve, 9 dashes, enclosing nearly 90% of the South China Sea as Chinese sovereign territory. The problem was that international law disagreed. Under the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea, the framework governing maritime boundaries for most of the world, a country's ocean territory is measured from its coastline. China's coastline didn't reach the Spratly Islands, not even close. The Spratlys sit nearly 1,000 miles from the Chinese mainland, scattered across open water that Vietnam, the Philippines, Malaysia, and Brunei all had far stronger legal claims to. But the same law contained a gap, and China found it. A submerged reef generates no territorial rights for anyone. Legally, it's nothing. A rock that breaks the surface at low tide earns a tiny buffer zone, but still no exclusive economic rights. To trigger full territorial protection, a feature had to qualify as a natural island, permanently above water. Capable of sustaining human habitation, the Spratly reefs were not islands. So China decided to make them islands. The trigger came in 2012. Chinese and Philippine vessels faced off near Scarborough Shoal, a reef well within the Philippines' exclusive economic zone. China moved in Coast Guard ships, blocked Filipino fishermen from waters their families had worked for generations, and simply refused to leave. Manila had no military answer. The standoff resolved in China's favor through presence alone. Beijing took precise note of what had just happened. Diplomatic protests didn't reverse physical occupation. Legal arguments didn't move ships. And an international community too economically entangled with China to act decisively was not going to intervene in time. China didn't need a stronger legal argument. It needed facts on the ground, permanent ones, concrete ones, runways and radar and harbors that no tribunal ruling could physically remove. The strategy was decided. The engineering problem came next, and it was a problem that had never been solved at this scale, at this speed. In conditions this hostile, the machine China assembled for this project didn't look like a construction fleet. It looked like an invasion, dozens of vessels. Support ships, cement barges, fuel tankers, crane platforms, and at the center of it all, cutter suction dredgers. Machines so large they operate as floating factories. A rotating cutter head drops to the seabed, tears through coral and sediment, and pumps the slurry up through pipes to wherever you need land to appear. China's most powerful dredger in the fleet was the Tianjinghao, at the time one of the largest vessels of its kind on Earth. Its suction pipe alone could move enough material in a single day to fill several Olympic swimming pools. Hour after hour, around the clock, regardless of weather. And it was not working alone. At peak operation, satellite imagery showed more than 60 vessels working simultaneously across multiple reef sites. The South China Sea, at night, glowed with construction lighting visible from orbit. Beijing wasn't edging carefully into disputed water. It was flooding the zone with industrial force. Moving faster than any diplomatic response could track, the volume of material moved is almost impossible to picture. Roughly 100 million cubic meters of sand, coral rubble, and dredged sediment, pulled from the ocean floor and piled into sovereign territory. Stack that material over Manhattan, and you'd bury every building below the 4th floor. That's what China extracted from the seabed and called land. 7 reef features were targeted. The 3 largest, Fiery Cross, Subi, and Mishkif Reef,
Completed in under 4 years, this military archipelago outpaces the Panama Canalical engineering.
that meant at least 3 kilometers of flat, stable, load-bearing surface, built on reclaimed sand in the middle of an open ocean typhoon corridor. The supply chain behind this defied standard logistics. Hainan Island became the staging ground. Cement plants ran continuous pours. Steel fabrication yards worked double shifts producing prefabricated components, runway sections, hangar frames.
Vast stretches were pressed by late and pointed floor.
Food for thousands of workers arrived by sea. Fuel to keep the fleet running required constant resupply. There was no port to dock at, no road to drive down, no airstrip to land on, yet. Every resource keeping those workers alive and that construction moving arrived by vessel, in conditions that shifted from flat calm to tropical storm, with almost no warning. The financial cost climbed accordingly.
I want to be absolutely clear, this construction is civilian infrastructure are false and hinder regional stability.
Somewhere between $10 and $13 billion. 3 operational airstrips, deep-water harbors capable of docking naval destroyers, underground fuel storage, aircraft hangars hardened against missile strike, radar arrays, surface-to-air missile batteries. For comparison, the entire Panama Canal expansion cost roughly $5 billion and took a decade. China built an archipelago of forward military bases in a contested open ocean in under 4 years. But speed at this scale always hides a cost. The coral reefs beneath these sites were not empty seabed. They were among the most biologically dense ecosystems on the planet. Nurseries for fish stocks that tens of millions of people across Southeast Asia depend on for protein. Scientists monitoring the construction estimated that over 160 square kilometers of living reef were destroyed.
I was here when my son was born and my mother died. We heard by satellite phone there's no going back.
China's official messaging ran alongside the construction the entire time. Spokesmen insisted the work was civilian: lighthouses, weather stations, search and rescue facilities. Meanwhile, American reconnaissance aircraft overhead were transmitting imagery showing military-grade runway markings, weapons bunkers rising from the fill, and reinforced taxiways built to handle combat aircraft. The denial wasn't designed to be believed. It was designed to buy time. By late 2015, the runways were taking shape. The concrete was curing. The islands existed. Legally contested, environmentally catastrophic, strategically undeniable. But something no dredger could solve was quietly becoming the project's most dangerous problem. The engineers knew it. The geologists advising the program knew it. The military planners signing off on runway weight specifications knew it. The land they had built was not behaving like land. Consider what it meant to work there, 900 miles from the mainland. No land visible in any direction. The nearest city further away than London is from Moscow. You wake up on a construction barge, the deck shifting beneath you, the horizon an unbroken line of open ocean, and your job is to build a military airbase on material that 6 months ago was sitting 60 feet underwater. Chinese state media occasionally ran profiles of the workers. Engineers in their 30s describing rotations of 8 to 12 months without going home. Men who missed the births of children, who learned of family deaths by satellite phone with no way to get back. One engineer described the psychological weight of the isolation as something that didn't hit immediately. It accumulated, shift by shift, until the ocean stopped feeling like a backdrop and started feeling like a wall. These were not reluctant conscripts. They believed in what they were building. But belief doesn't protect steel from saltwater corrosion, or concrete from the particular violence of a South China Sea typhoon. The structural problem had been understood from the start, but its true scale only revealed itself under load. Reclaimed land is not natural land. It is compacted fill, sand, crushed coral, dredged sediment, pressed together and shaped into surface area. Under the weight of a residential building, given time to settle, it performs adequately. Under the weight of a 3-kilometer military runway, receiving fully fueled fighter jets at landing speeds, it becomes a different problem entirely. The specific danger is called liquefaction. When saturated sandy soil takes a sudden shock, a landing aircraft, a seismic tremor, a sustained typhoon assault, The water pressure between the sand particles spikes. The material stops behaving like a solid. It flows. A runway that looked finished on the surface could, under the wrong conditions, begin sinking unevenly, cracking, buckling, becoming unusable within hours. The Spratlys sit inside a seismically active region. Minor tremors are routine. Satellite analysis by defense research groups, tracking the build detected measurable subsidence, gradual sinking, across several features during and after the reclamation phase. Fiery Cross Reef showed millimeter-scale settlement across runway sections still being poured. For a civilian road, millimeter variance is irrelevant. For a military airstrip handling 70-ton aircraft, it demands an answer. China's engineers answered with 3 interlocking techniques: vibroflotation, driving vibrating probes deep into the fill to compact the sand and force out trapped water; cement soil mixing, injecting slurry into the fill layers to create a semi-rigid matrix that resists liquefaction; and deep drainage networks, perforated pipes running beneath the runway surface to manage water pressure during storm events. None of these methods were untested, but applying all 3 simultaneously at this scale in open ocean, on a timeline with almost no room for remediation, that had never been done. Then October 2015 arrived, and the project faced a threat no engineering solution could address. The USS Lassen, an American guided missile destroyer, transited waters within 12 nautical miles of Subi Reef. A freedom of navigation operation, the U.S. Navy's pointed legal statement that China's reclaimed features generated no sovereign territorial waters. Beijing responded with radio warnings and diplomatic protests. The Lassen completed its transit and departed without incident, but the incident exposed something concrete couldn't fix. China had built physical facts on the water. The United States had just demonstrated that physical facts don't automatically become legal recognition, and that the world's most powerful navy intended to keep making that point repeatedly at close range. Escalate against a U.S. warship, and the project becomes a military confrontation with global consequences. Back down, and every watching nation understood these islands could be challenged without cost. Beijing absorbed the provocation and accelerated the build. The instruction passed down to construction teams was not subtle: finish faster, install more, make the presence undeniable, not through confrontation, but through completion. In July 2016, the Permanent Court of Arbitration in The Hague issued its ruling. The Philippines had brought the case. The tribunal found, comprehensively, that China's island building violated Philippine sovereign rights, that the reclaimed features didn't qualify as islands under international law, and that the 9-dash line had no legal foundation. China's foreign ministry rejected it the same day. Null and void, illegal. A piece of paper. By then the runways were operational. The hangars were full. The missiles were in position. The ruling hadn't stopped anything, but it had named what China built for exactly what it was. And now the world had to decide what to do about a fortress declared illegal by an international court that was already armed, already operational, in the middle of the most important sea on Earth. The islands work. That is the uncomfortable truth. No diplomatic protest, no tribunal ruling, no naval transit has managed to change. Fiery Cross Reef operates as a fully functional forward military base. Fighter jets rotate through its hangars. Anti-ship missiles, with a range long enough to threaten vessels far beyond the visible horizon, sit in hardened shelters along its perimeter. Surface-to-air batteries scan the sky around the clock. A runway that didn't exist 15 years ago now stretches 3 kilometers over what was open ocean, long enough to launch a strike aircraft toward any capital in Southeast Asia. Subi Reef hosts a deep-water harbor capable of docking naval destroyers and submarine support vessels. Mischief Reef, the feature sitting closest to the Philippine coastline, has become a logistics hub that can sustain a prolonged naval deployment without resupply from the mainland. Together, these 3 installations form an overlapping triangle of weapons coverage. Any one of them can reach into the airspace and sea lanes that Vietnam, the Philippines, Malaysia, and Brunei have long depended on for their own security. The South China Sea, which no single nation could dominate from a distance, can now be observed, contested, and if Beijing chooses, closed from fixed positions at its center. The fishing communities never recovered. Filipino fishermen from Palawan, whose fathers and grandfathers worked the waters around Mischief Reef for generations, now encounter Chinese Coast Guard vessels when they cross into what international law still recognizes as their own exclusive economic zone. They are turned back, catches confiscated, boats damaged. There is no negotiation, no appeal, only the presence of a larger vessel and the understanding that the sea they grew up on has been reorganized around them without their consent, without compensation, and with no mechanism to reverse it. The environmental cost compounds quietly. The concrete has set. What hasn't settled is everything that comes next.